Hey, this is Jerry Roberts again, and today we're going to start discussing the challenges that face us related to culture shock. Um, Culture shock is a normal activity, it's a normal happening within anybody who's attempting to cross cultures. If you choose to go and live in a different culture among a different people group, if you choose to dedicate your life to living among them, you will experience culture shock. There is no way around it, and there's no way to avoid it. It's a normal happening that you're going to walk through. Now, understand if you just make short-term missions trips, if you just go in for 3 weeks or 4 weeks or a month, you might never experience the real depth of culture shock because typically culture shock kicks in after you've been living in a place for at least a month, maybe 2 months, maybe even 3 months before it actually really kicks in. So just because you've traveled internationally doesn't mean you've really experienced the depth of culture shock. Culture shock is that it's what you experience as you really start living among a group of people. And as we just want to make it clear, I'm not telling you these things to scare you. I'm not telling you these things so that you can say, oh no, I don't want to do that anymore. I'm telling you these things so that you'll be equipped, enabled, that you will not have culture shock hit you and it will be a surprise to you. You will experience these things. Now, everyone experiences them to different degrees. Everyone experiences different aspects of them to different amounts, but you will experience culture shock. So let's talk a little bit, what are some of the elements that cause culture shock? Well, really, culture shock is caused by a movement from familiarity to unfamiliarity. So really, that's the biggest issue. And even if you've moved across the United States, if you've moved from Boston to Los Angeles, you move from Minneapolis to Dallas, if you move from Florida to Kansas, you've experienced at least a small taste of culture shock even doing that. So from familiarity to unfamiliarity, but what are some of the specifics involved in that? Well, first, there's the aspect of moving from security to insecurity. To some degree, in most of the United States, we live with a feeling of security. We live with a feeling like I'm generally safe. My belongings are generally safe. My home is generally safe. Now, there are places where there is higher crime and higher incidents of violence and things that you might feel not quite as secure. But in general, in the U.S., there is a general feeling of security. When you shift and change to a different culture, it's quite possible you're going to move to a place that is less secure. Now, that less secure may be actual or it may be philosophical. You may be moving to somewhere where there's been a war or there's a war going on in the country nearby. Well, that's higher insecurity. You may go to a place that is ruled over by, I don't know, warlords or small gangs or whatever else, and so you've got a lot of violence going on around you. You might move into a place that's got a high incidence of some sort of an illness or disease, and it creates a feeling of insecurity. Or you might, just as we did in Latvia, you might move into a place that's really similarly secure, but you don't feel as secure because you can't communicate yet. When we first moved to Latvia, you didn't have crime running on the street. We didn't have a war going on or things like that. But I very quickly realized that if someone tried to break in the door of the house we were living in, for a while we didn't have a phone, but then we got a phone. What number do I dial? Well, in the States, we know we dial 911. Well, it's not 911 over there. It was 141114 or something like that. So what number do you dial? When the person answers the phone, what language are they going to speak? I can promise you it's not going to be English. So when they answer the phone and I start trying to tell them in English that someone's breaking in the door and they don't speak English, then what do I do? When I first arrived in Latvia, I didn't speak the Latvian language. I didn't speak enough Russian to say there is someone breaking in the door. That's a challenging thing to say. And so even though we were not less secure in reality, we felt less secure because we did not have a means of calling for help. And so once again, it was just a small change that went on there. A second part of this is a movement from support systems to self-reliance. We are, all of us, unaware of how many support systems we have. We are surrounded by people who help us, who help to take care of us, who help to meet our needs, people who can answer questions for us, people who can drive us places, people who, now there are a few people who don't have great support systems, and that's very sad. But the truth is, once you leave the U.S. and go to the secondary location, you're probably going to be going to a situation where you have to kind of take care of yourself more. You have to get yourself up out of bed. You have to figure out what bus to get on and where to get off. And you have to figure out how to get a language tutor and how to get, there's going to be a lot of self-reliance that's going to have to begin happening. And that shift causes stress. It causes a lot of stress to go from having your mom drop by and bring you food on Tuesday afternoons to having your mom 11 time zones away and you get to talk to her once a week. Okay? So that culture shock, that is a stress that goes on. We're moving usually from comfort to inconvenience. Comfort comes in many, many different ways. It could be literally physical comfort, because you may be used to living in a comfortable environment with a comfortable bed and comfortable floors to walk on, and everything is clean, and the food that you're comfortable eating. Matter of fact, we even have stuff we call comfort food. And we're used to being able to grab that fried chicken and mashed potatoes when we don't feel good, and we just eat that comfort food and such. So there's lots of different things that are comfort, but we don't realize that just knowing how to do things is a level of comfort. Knowing how to find a store, knowing how to find a product in a store, knowing how to pay for something, knowing where to go for this and where to go for that. And there's just a comfort. And oh my goodness, when I lived in Latvia, every time even after I'd studied the language, even after I had become relatively fluent in Latvian and decently conversational in Russian, every time I picked up my phone and I got ready to call someone, I stopped and I thought through the conversation I was planning to have, and I thought through any special words I might need to remember, what verb tense I was going to need to use, what are some subjects that might come up, do I know how to say that? I literally had to stop for a minute and think through the conversation I was about to have before I even placed the call. It's been a long time since I've come back to the States. When I first got back from the States, I kept doing that. That was the weird thing. I'd stop, okay, I'm going to talk to this person. Wait, I speak English. I can do this, But it's inconvenient. Making a phone call is inconvenient. Going to the store is inconvenient. Getting things is inconvenient. Getting to things is everything about it is inconvenient. And you may not have as comfortable of furnishings, and it may be a noisier environment than you're used to, or whatever else. So there's a shift from comfort to inconvenience. And most of all, it's movement from known to unknown. You may not think you know a lot, but you do. You know how to say hello. You know how to say goodbye. You know when you should do this and when you should not do this. You know what time you should arrive and what time you shouldn't arrive. What time you should leave, what time you should. You know a lot. You just don't realize how much you know. And you don't realize how much you know until you go to another country where everything's done differently, and you realize you don't know how to do all those things or the proper procedures for doing those things in that country. So there's this shift from familiarity to unfamiliarity, and that's the main causes for culture shock. So let's look for a minute. What really is culture shock? Culture shock is a form of psychological strain. As a matter of fact, some of the things I'm going to be discussing in the upcoming lectures address this very issue, and really it's like Psychology 101 that we're going to be talking about in some of this stuff. But culture shock is a form of psychological strain because human beings tend to be homeostatic. Homeostatic means that we resist change. We like to do things the way we like to do things. because we like to do them that way. We don't like doing things different ways because the different way is not the way I'm familiar with. So this homeostatic nature, this nature that we have that resists change, makes us very resistant to change, and it also makes us very anxious when we have to change. And when you start thinking about all the different things that you have to change in this list down here, you begin to realize that there's a lot of reasons for psychological stress. There's that sense of loss of friends and friendships. You can't hang out with your friends anymore. You're not there. They're not here. You're 8 or 10 hours difference in time zones. So even if you do want to visit with them once a week by chat or whatever else, you got to set up a special time because it's 4 in the morning for you and noon for them, or noon for you and 8 in the evening for them, and it's even hard to find time to visit with them. A loss of status and profession. You don't know who you are anymore for a while. Americans really identify ourselves very strongly based on who we are and what we do. And even if someone were to ask you right now, well, what do you do? You'd say, oh, well, I'm a student. I'm studying theology. I'm studying ministry. I'm studying intercultural studies. That sense of status is important to us. And when you go to a new country, you don't have a clear status at first. Your status is new person who has arrived in new country. And so you don't have that clear status, especially in a lot of countries. You're not allowed to say the M word. You're not allowed to state that I'm here as a minister of the gospel of Jesus Christ, although you can't even say that. So you have this strange feeling of what is my status? What is my profession? There's sometimes a loss of possessions. There are things you have to leave behind. A lot of things you have to leave. You can't take it all with you. We had to leave a dog. That was an uncomfortable thing to do, but we chose to do it early on before we really got deeply into itineration, so we weren't literally giving our dog away as we left the country, but we couldn't take our dog with us. It didn't have a passport, and you think I'm making that up. The dogs in Latvia have dog passports, and I'm not making that up. I brought my dog home with me from Latvia because America would allow me to do it, but that's because my dog had a passport. My American dog didn't have a passport. It couldn't go. Anyway, there's the sense of being rejected by your new culture, and even if they're not rejecting you, you feel rejected because you can't talk to them. You don't speak their language. You don't know how to talk to them yet. And so you feel like you're being rejected by the people in the new culture. So, and then there's the confusion of role. Who am I? What do I do? What is it that I do now? What is it? How is it that I fit into society now? Western identity, as I said, it has to do with what I do. And so if I don't do the things I used to do, who am I now? So you can see that culture shock is this feeling of psychological strain that we go through. Just one of the statements, one of the summary definitions is the shock of cultural differences experienced. The shock of cultural differences experienced. And some will lead to responses of surprise, some to disgust, some to humor, some to judgmentalism. Sometimes we go like, well, what they're doing is sinful. They shouldn't do that. That's a bad behavior. Do you know they take bribes? Can you believe they take bribes? Well, that's just sinful, okay? So the cultural differences. And as I mentioned before, this doesn't happen in your first it's not going to happen on a 3-week mission trip. Maybe a little bit. But these feelings that we're talking about, that feelings of hopelessness, this feeling of will I ever fit in again? How will I ever get this language? How will I ever get this culture? These are things that happen in month 3 through month 13. These are things that happen as you're really coming to grips with the fact that everything is different in everything, in every way, and everything is different. It's all different. The language is different. The culture is different. What they eat is different. What they drink is different. How they talk is different. Everything is different, and so there's a shock of the cultural differences that are experienced, and that's what culture shock really is. In our next lecture, we're going to go through the 4 stages of culture shock, and start looking into what it's like to experience culture shock.